All right, I am back with the one, the only Mr. Dustin, the Duster, Mason, my longtime friend, as the co-host for today. Chris could not be on due to obviously his busy school schedule, and in his own words, quoting, he didn't want to be here for half of an episode in which he had not watched any of the previous source material, because we're talking about the prequel movie for The Sopranos, the movie that we both have been waiting 2 years for. Probably actually a little bit longer, because I think it might have been announced back in 2017. The Many Saints of Newark, in addition to, unfortunately, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Dustin, you have anything to say before we get this started?
Let's just do this, man. I can't wait to talk.
I know where you were going with that, though. I know where you were going with that. What's going on, man? It's been a minute.
I know, right? It's also been a minute since Venom was supposed to come out, right. and now it is out. And I was so. Can I just say?
Finally came out. Well, hold on, wait, back up. First off, because again, we got to. I'm sorry, we got to do with this what we did with the Suicide Squad. You got to explain. Obviously, famously, the last time that he was on, Dustin